And welcome into the State of Purple in this State of Purple podcast. My favorite moment of the entire podcast each and every week, we do this twice a week, is when we run the open and it abruptly stops and Jack's looking down at his phone. It's my favorite thing every single time. It catches him off guard. Same open every single bit, but he's getting the tweets out. He's doing his job. He's promoting the show. I appreciate it. But Jack, it's funny to have that happen. How you doing, my man?
Doing well. We have some snow in Minnesota
right.
today, which is a little weird waking up in October. I shouldn't say weird. We're used to it by now, but mid-October, and the Vikings are heading down to South Beach to get some nice weather down there. And so I'm looking forward to talking about it. And we have a special guest joining us here shortly as well.
That's right. Yeah, we do have snow. It won't. I guess it's already melted here up in Osseo, but it has begun. This is Minnesota winter. Before we get to our special guest, real quick, let's talk about our sponsor, SodaStick and SodaStick.com. Thank you, SodaStick, for sponsoring the State of Purple podcast. You can go to SodaStick.com right now. Jack, you have a brand new fresh hat on. Look at that. That skull hat right there. Came in the mail this week. I got the new T-shirt on actually too. Look at this one. The Minnesota football land of 10,000 missed kicks. That's what it says in the bottom there.
Perfect slogan.
Yeah, you can get this apparel. You can get the apparel that's at the bottom if you're watching the live stream. Any Minnesota sports inspired goods, 15% off if you use the promo code KFAN at SodaStick and SodaStick.com. So thank you to SodaStick for sponsoring the podcast. Now let's get right into it. I'm going to pull our guest in here. We have. Let me get this over here. We're going to put him in the middle. Feature spot right there. Will Ragatz, my man, Vikings Nation writer, SI.com. Thanks for joining us. You cover this team like a blanket, man, and it is never a boring week. How has this week been treating you?
Yeah, it's been good. It's just a lot of good vibes around this team right now. They're 4-1. Like everything's been going well as far as the win column. The games haven't necessarily been pretty, and they've probably been a little more stressful at the end than the Vikings would like. But as long as you're winning games and you're learning lessons while you're doing it, that's a pretty good place to be in. And they have another winnable spot this week going to Miami. And what looked early in the season like it was going to be a pretty tough game, but now you're facing a rookie third-string QB. So, another great chance to get to 5-1 heading into the bye week.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I wanted to kind of start the show off with this about just the overall vibe of this team, because you – I've covered this team for a couple of years now, and you were able to see and cover the end of the Mike Zimmer and Rick Spielman era. And throughout the entire offseason, with the new regime taking over, the word culture and collaboration was thrown out. And I think it's easier, obviously, when the team is sitting at 4-1. But I don't remember, and we've had some fun with this on the show, I don't remember days where we got to see Kirk Cousins with a spinning chain and making jokes about it with the media. So I just wanted to kind of get a better understanding for kind of the vibe change that has happened within the last year for this team.
Yeah, I think as it sits right now, a lot of the record being 4-1, that helps with it, obviously. But I mean, it's something that we've seen dating back to this entire offseason. As soon as Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell were hired, like throughout OTAs, throughout training camp, it was just a lot of positivity and a lot of talk about this change in culture and how kind of everybody has a voice now, and there's a lot of collaboration and the communication going on. And I think both of those guys, Kevin O'Connell in particular, have really created just kind of a positive environment, and they've really kind of shifted the culture around and made everybody excited to come to work. And I think some of the stuff at the end of the Zimmer and Spielman era was maybe a little overblown because they were losing games and missing the playoffs and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a real thing. It's been different. The players have all talked about it this offseason going into this season. And I don't know if that has contributed to the results that we've seen on the field so far, but hey, maybe it has.
Well, you've alluded to it a couple times. The culture has shifted. The tone, the style of play on the field has shifted a little bit, but it hasn't been perfect yet. I mean, it's been phases of games that have disappeared throughout periods. You have the players that are sometimes blowing up and going crazy, and then the next week they disappear. This is the sign of a team. Right? Is this fair in saying this is a sign of a team that is still learning on the job and has enough talent to win games to potentially be scary down the stretch if they start to figure this thing out?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, it takes time to learn new schemes, especially, I mean, on the offensive side of the ball, the Vikings have rotated they've had a new offensive coordinator every year. But for the past 3 or 4 years or so, it was the same scheme mostly. It was like the Gary Kubiak kind of offense, a lot of wide zone, play action, things like that. And they're still doing a lot of that this year, but it's a completely different offense in terms of the terminology, like what things are called. A lot of the kind of general philosophical approach is different. They had to learn a lot of the new plays this offseason. Like Kevin O'Connell brought his version of the Sean McVay offense over from LA, and Kirk Cousins and others, the Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, they've all talked about it being kind of a big transition and there being a lot to learn. And so you can kind of see that happening still as these games are going on. And then defensively as well. I mean, there's some veterans who have been here for a while. Eric Kendricks, Daniel Hunter, Harrison Smith, who played in the same Mike Zimmer defense for 8 years or 7 years or whatever it was. And so now they've had to shift to a completely different defense, a 3-4 under Ed Donatel. That takes time too. So yeah, they're just kind of getting comfortable. And as you get more reps and live game reps, like it's becoming easier and everyone's learning it. And the fact that they are 4-1 while that process is going on, I think has to be encouraging, because if they do start to put it all together, then yeah, I think this could be a pretty good team in the next few months. I don't know right now if they are a good team, because like we saw them barely beat a Bears team that just looked horrendous on Thursday Night Football against the Commanders. Like they should be winning some of these last few games by more than they have, but I do think that the optimistic outlook is they're winning these games, they're learning, and maybe it'll start to get easier as we move forward.
So up to this point, obviously you were on the team throughout training camp, throughout the offseason, throughout the preseason, and now the regular season. Is there any players or player, if there's only one that comes to mind, that has been the biggest surprise for this team so far in your eyes? Yeah,
I think the biggest surprise would probably be Garrett Bradbury, the Vikings center, because like, I mean, everyone who's watched this team play the last 3 years knows like he has not been able to pass protect, and he's been at the bottom of PFF's pass blocking rankings every year. And you can kind of just tell on the eye test, like he just would get blown up by these big defensive tackles. And so that was kind of viewed as a big weakness coming into the season. And it was surprising to me that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah didn't really address that position at all, where he addressed several others in free agency and the draft. And they kind of just talked up Garrett Bradbury and went into the season with him. And whatever they knew, it's working so far, because Bradbury has looked like a different player. He's obviously he's always been an asset in the run game, and he gets praised for his communication in terms of the center is like the quarterback of the offensive line, calling out protections and things like that. And but the pass blocking has been good, and like he's having a legitimately good year in that area. So that's been kind of surprising to me. Whatever they've done with putting him in different positions to succeed in this new offense, or different techniques, or it's been working for him so far.
Let's flip that question on its head for a second. Anybody that stands out to you as, to date at least, not really fitting in with the new scheme, or not living up to the expectation maybe that we had coming into the season?
Yeah, I think the obvious answer there is probably Daniel Hunter, just because he's a guy. I mean, he was the youngest player in NFL history to reach 50 career sacks, like back-to-back 14.5 sack seasons in 2018 and 2019. Just really a dominant 4-3 edge rusher. And switching to this scheme, we haven't seen kind of the production there yet. I know he had a sack against the Bears, but it was kind of a cleanup sack, and he's got 2 in 5 games, which just isn't really what you expect from a player of Daniel Hunter's caliber. I know he's missed a lot of time the last 2 seasons to injuries, but yeah, it's been an interesting adjustment just to see how he's used in this 3-4, where sometimes he has his hand on the ground, but sometimes he's standing up. Sometimes he's a little wider and he's getting like chipped by tight ends, and he has kind of a long path to get to the quarterback. And he even dropped into coverage a couple times, which is just kind of bizarre to me. So I think there's still a ton of time, and he's one of the players who has had a big adjustment. And I'm always going to kind of bet on his talent figuring it out. But through 5 games, I think it's been a little underwhelming for Daniel Hunter.
Yeah, I think maybe we can start to switch gears a little bit now and focus on that Miami game. And one of the questions that I had for you, or just wanted you to kind of talk about this a little bit, was an article that you wrote, because it always feels as if like the Miami roots run really strong in the NFL. And you wrote a story about that with Dalvin Cook. And I wanted you to just kind of talk about that a little bit, because that's been the case. Obviously, Teddy Bridgewater is from that area as well. And it's always kind of felt like that, like they have those really strong roots from Miami. And I thought that was a cool story that you wrote. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, it's one of the kind of hotbeds of football producing talent, great high school football scene down there. And Dalvin Cook was a legend in high school. He won Florida's Mr. Football his senior year, 5-star recruit, ended up going to Florida State and like really, really shining there. And the Vikings drafted him, and he's turned into one of the best running backs in the NFL. But in his 6th season, this will finally be his first time going back to play an NFL game in Miami, which it just means a lot to him in terms of getting to play in front of his family and friends in his hometown. And the fact that he'll have the number 4 jersey on also means a lot to him. I think people have probably heard that story. He changed this offseason. That's the number he wore growing up and in high school and college, and was kind of passed down from his older brother to him and from him to his younger brothers, and kind of means a lot to him and his family. And so I think this weekend will be pretty special for Dalvin Cook. And he is always, like, if you look at his college numbers, he has always played well. He pointed this out on Twitter himself, actually, in Florida against teams from Florida. So if you're looking for somebody to maybe have a big game on Sunday, I think Dalvin Cook would be a good bet.
This Miami team coming in from the offseason and then through the first couple weeks of this year were crazy good. They're the high-flying, entertaining football team. Obviously, there's a situation at quarterback right now. Tua Tagovailoa out this week with the concussion situation. Teddy Bridgewater, that status is up in the air. Sky Thompson is the quarterback this week, but they do get Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle back on the field. This felt like a game a couple weeks ago that would have been tough. Now it feels like a game that is winnable. How do you assess this one, and what do you get from the tone of the players as they attack this one and get ready for Miami?
Yeah, the message you're always going to get from players when you ask, like, hey, what are your thoughts on going against this rookie third-string quarterback? Like, they're never going to say, oh, yeah, we should win this game. Like, this guy is an NFL quarterback. Like, any quarterback you face in the NFL is going to be capable of delivering the ball to their playmakers and kind of operating an offense. That's why they're here. So I think Skylar Thompson, we just don't know that much about him. He had a really good preseason, 7th-round pick from Kansas State. He was fine, I guess, last week when he was kind of thrust into action after Teddy got hurt on the first play of that game against the Jets. But this week, he will have the whole week to prepare as the starter instead of just kind of being thrust into action like he was last week. So I think he should still be capable of getting the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They have a really good running back who's playing well right now in Raheem Mostert, former San Francisco 49er. So, like, this offense is still going to be dangerous because of the skill position weapons. But I'm curious to see, like, the Vikings have kind of sat back a lot on defense and given a lot of cushion to receivers and tried to keep everything in front of them and make you kind of dink and dunk your way down the field. I'd be curious to see if they bring more pressure this week and try to fluster a young rookie quarterback who, according to the scouting reports, might kind of not want to hang in the pocket. And if he senses pressure, he might try to take off or panic a little bit. So I could see the Vikings dialing up some more blitzes this week to try to kind of fluster the young QB.
And I think their left tackle is supposed to be, or I don't know if he's supposed to be out. I don't think he's practiced yet this week. I could be wrong on that. Correct me if I am wrong.
No, Teron Armstead, you're right. I think he's missed the first 2 practices of the week.
So I want to see, what are some matchups that you're looking forward to in this game? Because I'm excited. There's going to be a ton of playmakers on both sides of the ball, obviously. And it's kind of 2 of the up-and-coming offensive-minded individual head coaches in the league, too, with Kevin O'Connell and Mike McDaniel. So wanted to get your thoughts. Obviously, a lot of playmakers. So wanted to see who some of your players are or matchups that you're looking forward to watching in this one.
Yeah, you touched on it. I think just kind of an obvious one is Kevin O'Connell against Mike McDaniel. Like, these are 2 really, really bright offensive minds. Which one is going to, call the better game and put their players in the better position? And Kevin O'Connell has a chance to actually beat 3 consecutive first-year head coaches with Dennis Allen of the Saints and Matty Eberflus of the Bears, and now and now Mike McDaniel, which would be a pretty good way to start 5-1. But that's obviously a sidelines battle. I think on the field, obviously every week you're looking at Justin Jefferson, and I think he's going to be going against Xavier Howard this week, who's been dealing with maybe a little injury issue, but I believe is expected to play and one of the top cornerbacks in the league. So can Jefferson have another huge game after 2 in a row? And on the other side of the ball, I would say, I mean, just it's easy obviously to look at the wide receivers, but the Vikings need to find ways to contain the speed of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And that's why when you saw how the Dolphins were playing the first 3 weeks of the season, like this looked like a really scary matchup because the Vikings have struggled with speed. I mean, Cam Dantzler's having a good season, but the reason he was drafted in the 3rd round is because he ran a 4.6. Like, he's not the fastest guy. Patrick Peterson, good instinctive player, in his prime was the fastest corner in the league. He's like 32 years old. He's not in his prime. So, I mean, we saw him get run past by Christian Watson on the Packers' first play of that week 1 game. And we've seen them kind of struggle with speed and on the back end. So that's why this looks scary. It's now, I think, a little bit less scary with no Tua in there because to deliver the ball to them. But it's still something where you got to know where those two guys are at all times, and you can't let them get behind you because Skylar Thompson has the arm capable of getting it there.
Will Ragatz is our guest. You can find his work on FanNation and SI.com. Will, the assessment of Adam Thielen's season so far has gone a bunch of different ways. Every year when you talk about Patrick Peterson being 32 years old, you talk about these older players, the narrative oftentimes will be, is Father Time going to catch up with him this year? It doesn't look like that, but his usage has changed this year. Maybe it's the new offense. Maybe it's Justin Jefferson getting all the attention. What do you read into that with the Adam Thielen situation? Are we worried about it, or is this just going to work itself out throughout the season?
I don't think it's something to be worried about, but I think anyone out there expecting Adam Thielen to still be like 2018 Adam Thielen I just don't think he's that player anymore. I mean, that was just the peak of his athletic career, and he started that season with like 800-yard games in a row, and he's just not going to produce at that level, in part because he has lost a little bit of a step, but also Justin Jefferson is the number 1 wide receiver, and he's the alpha, and he's going to be the first read on a lot of Kirk Cousins dropbacks. So Adam Thielen, I think, is still a valuable player to have in this offense. He can block. He's a good route runner, even if he's not getting as much separation as he used to. He's got good hands. So he's going to be a good chain moving weapon on 3rd down. He's still going to be a red zone threat, even though he only has 1 touchdown so far this year. But I think he's still going to be almost an every down player. I just don't think you're going to see many like 100-yard games from him. Maybe a handful throughout the year, but he doesn't have one yet through 5 weeks. And KJ Osborne is still going to be very involved. And I don't think it's crazy to say that KJ Osborne and Adam Thielen are kind of just on a similar level at this point in their careers in terms of being kind of reliable secondary receivers for the Vikings.
This is kind of going back to the matchups question, but how concerned are you? I think when we talk about these offensive-minded head coaches, they're very good at finding the mismatches across the ball from them. And I think through the first 5 games of the season, it's pretty clear where that weakness is on the Vikings side of the ball. Are you concerned about Chandon Sullivan potentially getting exposed by Waddle or Tyreek Hill if they decide to line up either of them from the slot?
No, I think it's a fair concern. I think that's an accurate assessment. Chandon Sullivan is like, he was signed this in free agency to replace Mackenzie Alexander and just kind of be competent at slot corner. And there's been times where he has done that. And there's also been times where he's looked like kind of a weakness for this Vikings defense. And I think obviously Mike McDaniel is going to know that, so it would not surprise me at all. I mean, it would surprise me if they didn't utilize Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in the slot a fair amount and try to kind of find that matchup and exploit it. So the Vikings will have to know that, and they'll have to maybe give him some safety help and not put him in true one-on-one situations. Because we've seen where it seems like he gets burned is if he's in man from the slot and then they run those crossing routes, and it's just hard. I mean, it's hard for any slot corner to kind of keep up with those routes, but especially a guy like Chandon Sullivan, especially against like a Jalen Waddle. So that's something the Vikings will have to definitely be aware of. I'll also kind of be curious to watch Jordan Hicks and see how he does, because he's been kind of an up and down player for the Vikings so far. He's done a lot of good things, but also has kind of gotten exploited in pass coverage at times. So he's somebody to watch, especially considering that the rookie Brian Asamoah just played his first 6 defensive snaps of the year last week, and we'll see if he maybe continues to mix in a little bit.
Well, what's your assessment of the Vikings tight end usage and Irv Smith's season so far?
Yeah, it's been interesting because Irv obviously had the thumb injury that cost him most of training camp, and then he kind of got eased in the first couple of games as a result of that. And they really like Johnny Munt, who came over with O'Connell and Wes Phillips from LA and knows the offense really well. There's been some drop issues with both of those guys. Obviously, Irv had the kind of very notable one in Philadelphia on what could have been a long touchdown. Johnny Munt had one against the Saints that forced the Vikings to settle for a field goal. So that part of it hasn't been ideal, but now with Ben Ellefson on IR, it's just kind of going to be those two guys going forward, and they like kind of the interchangeable aspect between those two. Like, they can do a lot of the same things. They obviously have slightly different skill sets. Irv's more of a downfield passing game threat. Johnny Munt's more of a blocker, but they can both do a little bit of that. And I think Irv has, over the past few weeks, kind of reestablished himself as the number one tight end in terms of snaps and things like that. And I think they'd like to keep getting him more and more involved in the passing game because he is kind of a mismatch for both linebackers and safeties.
So I kind of, this is kind of two questions in one, but I think they kind of tie together. So I wanted to see, do you have any bold predictions for the game in Miami? And if the Vikings are to come out on top of this one, who's going to have the strongest performance?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I already kind of alluded to, I think Dalvin Cook is somebody to watch to have a big game. He hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game yet. I think that's going to happen in Miami. But I will also say that I think defensively, I would look for Zadarius Smith to kind of have a big game. This Dolphins offensive line has not been great so far. I've been really impressed with Smith, and he had the knee injury that he dealt with a little bit for the past couple of games, and I think he's kind of back to being 100% now. So maybe my bold prediction will be 2 sacks and a forced fumble for Zadarius Smith, and that would certainly help the Vikings win the game.
That's a good one, and very specific too. That's good. We're going to hold you to that one.
All right.
Hopefully it works out for the Minnesota Vikings. He's Will Ragatz. Again, you can follow him on Twitter. It's Will Ragatz is his handle, Ragatz. And you can find his podcast, Purple Insider Podcast. You can find him SI.com, Fan Nation as well. Will, thank you so much. I know you have a busy day today, open locker room. You got press conference with the coach coming up. So we'll let you get to that. But thank you so much. Enjoy the game this weekend. Hopefully it goes the way of the Vikings. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
We'll talk to you later. See you, man.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, Jack. We will continue the end of this podcast with a couple of predictions of our own. The Miami Dolphins, are they 3-2? For some reason, I didn't write that down. Did they start 3-0 and then lost a couple games?
Yep, I think so.
Obviously, their season has changed quite a bit since Tua Tagovailoa got injured, and then last week's game was kind of thrown for a loop with Teddy going down on the first play. A couple questions I do have for you. Do you think that we see Teddy at all? I know it's kind of a weird situation. Skylar Thompson has been given the start as of now. Teddy will be the backup. Did Teddy get supplanted as the backup, or is this an injury situation, you think?
I think it has to be an injury situation, and I think it's people on the inside of the Miami organization being smart, because there was a lot of backlash that they got after the multiple or back-to-back weeks where Tua had a couple scary injuries that were both, I think, were they both straight head injuries? I know they were both scary injuries.
Shoulder in there as well too, but I mean, the head is the concern, right?
Yeah, and I think with the backlash they received from that, and then Teddy going down and getting injured last week, I think they have to play it safe. I wouldn't be shocked, I guess, if he is 100% and ready to go and Skylar Thompson starts and he comes out and throws 3 interceptions in a row. I think you'd almost have to look at him. But again, I don't want to assume that he is 100% healthy, because at the end of the day, I don't think that's fair. And I don't know if we can really do that. Speaking from a Vikings fan perspective, I would love to see Teddy Bridgewater play, because I know he lives in the hearts of many Vikings fans, and I think he will forever. And it'd be cool to see him kind of get a run with an offense that I think he could do some damage in, and in his hometown as well. But I think it's going to be the Skylar Thompson show from everything that I've seen up to this point, but it's the NFL and crazier things have happened.
Yeah, that being said, if Teddy were to win the game for the Miami Dolphins, I don't think Vikings fans could handle it. I mean, beloved figure, obviously it ended poorly here with the injury and never really fully getting back to where we thought he was going to be. But at the same time, we all know his limitations. We know what kind of quarterback he is, that there's not really stretching the field. We know he's not as mobile as he used to be. If that sort of game were to break this Vikings defense, and I think it would break the hearts and souls of the Vikings fans too, as we head into bye week. I mean, what the Detroit Lions carried a donut into the bye week after being the leading scoring team in the entire league. They laid an egg and headed into the bye week, and now the Detroit fans are all back. Everything that felt good about the season so far, Dan Campbell, blah, 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 Hard Knocks, all these things, it went straight south because you had 2 weeks to ruminate and to think about this poor performance that they put on tape right before heading into the bye week. That would be a bad situation for this Vikings team that is, again, we've talked many times, slowly putting this together, but coming out on top to the point where they have a winning record. They're second in the NFC, tops in the NFC North. All those things feel good right now. It'll feel real bad if they lose this game.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I don't know if this is coaching or training staff, but I think it should be talked about because just looking at the injury reports this week, Miami compared to the Vikings.
It's every week, man.
It's night and day. And I don't know if it's the new training staff, and this is a knock on wood situation, but
Sure.
Kevin O'Connell and his staff have done such a good job at keeping this team healthy. And that's been an issue over the last couple of seasons. When we talk about the Mike Zimmer regime and how it ended, it always felt like somebody on his defense would get hurt. If it was Danielle Hunter or someone would miss some time, Adam Thielen would go out for a few weeks, or Delvin Cook. And we haven't had that happen yet. And instead, it's been the opposite this week with Andrew Booth is now a full participant in practice, which I think is great news. Obviously, this goes other than the Lewis Seen injury in London. That was pretty scary. But other than that, this team has remained fairly healthy. And I think that's, again, I don't know who to give the credit to, but it's huge for the Vikings. And if they can stay healthy and then also start to click down the road, I think this is going to be a scary team moving forward.
I'd love to give credit to the training staff. It's probably mostly luck, right? I mean, that's just the way that this works. You can't avoid a broken ankle if you're, I mean, no matter how many, calcium bars and much milk they give you at the facility, your bone's going to break if your bone's going to break. So again, it's every week, Jack. I mean, this was last week with the Chicago Bears, the week before with the Lions. Whatever it is, they're getting lucky. They're staying healthy. There has been, outside of Lewis Seen, who had just started to get on the field, actually, there's really been no big role players that have missed large periods of time. Nagging injuries will happen. That's part of football. But again, you have a 2-week break here. So even the people that are on the 5 or 6 players that are on the injury report can hopefully get through this game, come out of it, do some rehab for a couple weeks, and then head into what would be week 8, and continue to put this thing together. So Jack, Will gave us a pretty specific bold prediction. Za'Darius Smith, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Anything stand out to you with this game? Any player stand out that you're sitting on for a big performance?
I always think about this. I don't know why it comes to my mind, but I always, before these shows, I think about, or I have a player ready in mind. And this week it does fall on the defensive side of the ball. And I think with it being Skylar Thompson, I think Vikings fans are so used to being scared of backup quarterbacks now, and that it kind of sucks that they have to live their fandom like that. But I don't think that's going to be the case this week. I have this weird feeling inside where I want to say it's going to be a get right game, and the team is 4-1. Like, it just feels like, I feel as if this is going to be the game that we really see this team start to click. And my bold prediction, because I feel like if you are going to win a game on the road against a rookie quarterback, you're going to have to create some turnovers. I don't know why this is. I have a feeling I'm going to call an Eric Kendricks interception, not a pick six, but I think Eric Kendricks, we've seen him a couple times this year where he's a hand away from getting his hands on the ball. I think he finds his hands on the ball. This gets a good read on Skylar Thompson, finds an interception. And I'm not going to be bold enough to say pick six, but I will say I think Eric Kendricks finds his hands on the football this weekend.
All right, my bold prediction is going to piggyback off of our guest's most recent article. Will Ragatz wrote about Dalvin Cook heading back to Miami, playing at home, and succeeding against teams from Florida in the state of Florida. It's kind of weird. I mean, he's had a couple good weeks in a row now. He had some yards 2 weeks ago, had 2 touchdowns last week, almost 3 touchdowns last week. But what I'm going to specifically go with is more than 150 rushing yards this week. I think that run game is going to bust open a little bit, which in theory should open up the passing game as well. So there's going to be a bunch of all-purpose yards for Dalvin Cook, but the specific bold prediction is going to be 150 rushing yards, 150 plus rushing yards for Dalvin Cook. We'll throw in a couple touchdowns in there. I'll take it. I mean, I'm not going to add that to my prediction, but if it happens, I'm all good for it. So we'll leave that.
We kind of went through the entire show without even talking about Kirk Cousins, really, which I will say is kind of odd doing that as a Vikings podcast. But I will say this. The Miami Dolphins are going up against, obviously, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, KJ Osborne. They are allowing, I believe it's second last in the NFL, or tied for second last. They're giving up 7.6 yards per catch. And we see the yak ability of guys like Justin Jefferson. We've seen it with Adam Thielen in the past. We've called for it from Irv Smith Jr.'s game a little bit more. And I'm a big fan of everything that we've said. Maybe all these bold predictions can happen at once and the Vikings can come out on top like 41-3 or something. I'm not going to go that crazy with my prediction, but
right.
I do have a weird feeling. Like I said, it just feels like the Vikings offense and defense, it hasn't had a full game put together yet. Or we can throw special teams in there because last week they can't let them get away with that one. But all 3 phases, they really they really haven't had a game where it felt like it all merged together. And I think going to Miami and playing a backup quarterback, I think the Vikings have a good chance of maybe not being perfect, but getting close to it.
I agree with your sentiment, but the words you just said, they struck a nerve with me. Going to Miami and playing a backup quarterback.
Ooh, yeah, I probably should.
Backup quarterback narrative has not treated this team well. Whether it's Cooper Rush, whether it's, the list goes on and on of quarterbacks that came in here that were not given a chance, even home games in Minnesota. And this team, whether they were too lax, whatever it was, they just didn't perform. So I was with you until you said that word, the backup quarterback. So again, we don't talk about Kirk when he's even Stevens, right? He had a great week last week to start the game, 17 for 17, leveled off a little bit, normal, but good week. We talk about Kirk when he's either really good, and we're talking about MVP Kirk, or when he's really bad, and we're talking about overpaid Kirk. So the fact that we didn't talk about him until the very end doesn't really surprise me. But man, you had to say backup quarterback. We talked in one fell swoop. You talked about missed field goal kicks and backup quarterbacks, Jack. I mean, those are like the 2 words, the 2 phrases we don't say here in this state. You know that. That's
true. I should be better on that, but I still feel optimistic, and I think, I don't know, we don't have a reason to believe yet that this new regime is going to allow that to happen. If we get to Monday morning and we're having a different conversation, then we can kind of go back to that narrative. But I think with Kevin O'Connell and his staff, I think Vikings fans have the right to put their faith in him and have high hopes for this game.
Yes. Well, we'll see how Monday goes, right? I think it'll be a good one. We'll see. A very winnable game. We'll leave it at that. Very winnable game for the Minnesota Vikings. Jack, thank you again for taking some time on your Friday. Will Ragatz was our guest today. You can find him on social media at Will Ragatz. Read him on FanNationSI.com. You can listen to him on the Purple Insider podcast as well. Will, thank you for taking some time. And thank you to Soda Stick for sponsoring this podcast. Jack's, I almost called you Will. Jack's hat, my shirt, and the shirts at the bottom of the live stream right now, all available. Minnesota Sports Inspired Goods, sodastick.com. Take 15% off when you use the promo code KFAN. Go head over there now, do that, do some shop, maybe some early Christmas shopping. Get ahead of the game. And oh man, I just got a package that arrived. Maybe it's my Soda Stick package. The UPS guy just rolled in. So I'm going to go check that. Jack, you have a great weekend. We will talk Monday. Skol Vikings, and we'll see you on the pregame. I never have the ending of this show ready. Jack, I'm like an amateur. I could talk forever, and then I forget to hit the button. All right, Jack, we'll see you later, man.
We'll see ya.